Welcome to Weekly Political Pulse on We Are Nigeria TV, the podcast where we break down the major political developments in the Nigerian political space every week. If you are looking for a clear, balanced way to catch up on Nigeria's politics in a nutshell, without the noise, the shouting, or the spin, you are in the right place. Like this episode, share it with others, and subscribe for weekly political insight that puts context before opinion. Now, here are your co-hosts.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're getting into the political and security landscape of Nigeria as of early 2026. And when you look at all the source material we've pulled together, you see this huge contradiction just jumping off the page.
That's really the defining tension of this moment. On the one hand, you have these very bold government statements about, national sovereignty and proper legislative process.
And on the other hand,
The stark reality, the lived reality for Nigerians. We're talking external military strikes, a massive internal crisis over the law itself, and of course the political class already laser focused on 2027.
So our mission today is to unpack three areas where you can really see this contradiction at play. First, Nigeria's sovereignty under the shadow of foreign military power.
Then we'll get into this unprecedented integrity crisis around the national tax laws.
And finally, the high-stakes political scramble that's already shaping the road to the next election. Our goal, as always, is to give you those key insights so you understand not just what's in the headlines, but why it all matters for the power structure, both at home and on the world stage.
Okay, so let's start with security. And that means we have to talk about the fallout from those U.S. airstrikes in December 2025.
Right, the ones targeting ISIS-linked groups in the Northwest.
Exactly. And the Nigerian authorities, their immediate reaction was to control the narrative. Foreign Minister Yusuf Tuggar insisted, these strikes were approved by President Tinubu. They were intelligence-led.
The idea was to signal this was a partnership, not a violation, to show they were in control.
Precisely. But the American framing was completely different, and frankly, deeply unsettling for the region.
Yeah, President Donald Trump connected the strikes directly to stopping the killing of innocent Christians in Nigeria.
And then his defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, just comes out and warns more to come. So this wasn't just a quiet military operation anymore. It became a very politically charged and seemingly open-ended intervention.
And that, of course, sparked this huge debate inside Nigeria about what sovereignty even means anymore.
It really did. Because even if the president approved it, the question a lot of people started asking was, why do we need them to do it? If we had the intelligence, which the government claimed they did, why couldn't the Nigerian Air Force carry out the mission?
And if you can't, it makes your claim to sovereignty feel a little hollow. You become dependent.
You do. And it sets a really dangerous precedent. The sources actually draw a line from this to the U.S. invasion of Panama in the late 80s.
To remove Noriega.
Right. And also to the more recent incident involving Venezuela's President Maduro. It's this idea that legal sovereignty doesn't mean much without power sovereignty.
There was a great quote from Professor Akinyemi on this. He basically said that if you lack the military and economic force to actually back up your legal claims to sovereignty, then you're, quote, just wasting your time.
And you could see that play out almost immediately in Nigeria's diplomatic response, or lack thereof. The opposition ADC party called out the government's, quote, embarrassing silence on the Venezuela incident.
The argument being that the government felt too vulnerable to speak up.
Exactly. They said it shows a government that lacks confidence because it lacks legitimacy. It couldn't act like a leading voice in Africa because it was worried about angering the very powers that were just dropping bombs on its soil.
A real vicious circle. So while that's happening, you have another foreign power, Israel, making a very different kind of offer.
A very different approach. The Israeli ambassador, Michael Freeman, announced plans for intelligence sharing and strategic cooperation. But he went out of his way to stress that it would be anchored on partnership and respecting Nigeria's sovereignty.
That language seems very intentional.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And he clarified that the scope was broad tackling terrorism and insurgency in general, not just the narrower, politically charged frame of protecting Christians that the U.S. used. It was presented as a much more collaborative, locally led form of support.
Okay, so that's the external picture. But the sources suggest that some of the biggest threats aren't from the outside, but from the inside, from the very institutions that are supposed to be making the laws.
Well, this is just a staggering story. It's a crisis that goes right to the heart of the rule of law. The National Assembly, NAS, as it's known, publicly disowned 4 major tax laws that had already been officially published or gazetted.
So wait, the national legislature is saying that the laws published in the official government record are not the laws they actually passed.
That is exactly what they're saying. We're talking about the National Revenue Service Act, the Tax Administration Act, and others. A member of the House, Abdusamad Zasuki, raised the alarm, calling it a breach of legislative privilege.
Which is a huge deal.
A massive deal. So the heads of both chambers, Speaker Abbas Tajuddin and Senate President Godswill Akpobio, they had to order the release of what are called certified true copies, the CTCs, to show what the laws should have said.
And when you compare the two versions, the gazetted one and the real one, the changes are not small, are they? This isn't a typo.
Not at all. This looks like deliberate sabotage.
Yeah.
Let's just look at a couple of the most shocking examples. First, on what the government can even tax. The altered, fake version of the law removed taxation of income from petroleum and value-added tax from the new revenue services mandate.
You're kidding. They removed oil and VAT. Those are the two biggest sources of revenue for the entire country.
They did. It fundamentally guts the entire purpose of the reform. Now, thankfully, those were put back in the certified true copies.
Okay, so that's one category. What's the other?
Accountability. And this is almost more chilling. The altered versions systematically stripped out legislative oversight. For example, they deleted the section that required the Revenue Service to submit quarterly and annual reports to the National Assembly.
So no reports.
No reports. They also removed the section that gave NAS the power to summon the head of the agency.
So whoever did this was trying to create a super powerful tax agency that answered to literally no one but the executive branch.
That's what it looks like. And it didn't just affect oversight. It hit taxpayers directly. The altered law lowered the income thresholds for filing returns, pulling more small businesses into the net.
And then there was that provision about appeals, which is just stunning.
Oh, that was the real bombshell. A new section was inserted that required a taxpayer to deposit 20% of the disputed tax amount as security before they could even file an appeal in court.
A massive barrier to justice, basically telling people not to even bother challenging the tax man.
Of course, that provision was not in the original law passed by NAS. It was a complete fabrication.
So legally, where does this leave things? If the official gazette contains a forged law, what is the actual law?
That's the terrifying question. Professor Chidi Odinkalu weighed in on this, and his take is pretty stark. He said that technically, whatever is in the gazette is the law until it's properly changed.
So they can't just issue a correction?
No. He says they have to go through the full legislative process, formally repeal the forged law, and then pass the correct one all over again. If they don't, he warned, Nigeria risks becoming what he called a banana republic, where the law is whatever a bureaucrat secretly decides it is.
And in the middle of all this legal chaos, is the tax agency pausing implementation?
Not a chance. The head of the Revenue Service, Zach Adedeji, has come out, warned people against misinformation, and confirmed that implementation has already started. He even put security agencies on alert for potential protests.
The machine just keeps rolling on, regardless.
It does. And that incredible crisis of trust is really the perfect backdrop for our final segment. The mad scramble for 2027.
Because if you can't trust the institutions, raw political power is the only thing that matters.
It's the only game in town. And we have to remember, in Nigeria, federal elections are so often won or lost at the state level. Gubernatorial power is key.
Right. The sources point to examples like Atiku winning Osun State because of Governor Adelek's grassroots machine, or Tinubu taking Benue thanks to Father Elia.
Exactly. And right now, the ruling APC has that incumbency factor and, relative stability. Meanwhile, the opposition parties are so fragmented, they often need the police to come in just to settle their internal squabbles.
So into that chaos steps this opposition coalition, the African Democratic Congress, the ADC.
Right. They're trying to unite these different factions. You've got major figures involved, like Atiku, Peter Obi Amachi, and the activist Aisha Yusufu just joined them as well.
And their pitch is that they'll be different, that they'll have transparent, competitive primaries to avoid the infighting that's doomed coalitions in the past.
That's the claim. They say all the public grandstanding right now is just part of the normal process of bringing different interests together. We'll see if that holds.
But the biggest hurdle, the elephant in the room for any coalition, has to be the Peter Obi question.
Without a doubt. His supporters, his base, they are adamant. It's the presidential ticket or nothing. They believe he has the momentum, the reputation, and, as one source put it, the ability to out-passion the ruling party.
But then you have the political strategists who say, well, hold on, maybe the smarter play for Obi is a vice presidential slot.
Yeah, that's the other school of thought. Maybe pair up with Atiku, who has the party structure. The idea being, secure the win now, maybe Atiku serves one term, and that paves the way for President Obi in 2031.
But that is a huge political risk for him, isn't it? The sources say he could lose a big chunk of his fan base if he's seen as playing second fiddle.
A massive risk. His whole brand in 2023 was built on being the outsider, the one who wouldn't compromise with the old guard. Accepting a VP slot now could be seen by his core supporters as a total betrayal of that principle.
And you see other players like Rabiu Kwankwaso also signaling their positions.
Right. Kwankwaso basically said he's open to a deal, but only if he gets the presidential or VP ticket. Yeah. Which shows you that these compromises are on the table, but it's all very high stakes.
He also had that interesting comment about Governor Metfwang, saying if he defects from the party, he should have to resign his governorship first.
Yeah, arguing that the mandate belongs to the people and the party, not the individual, which, is a principle that gets violated constantly.
You just have to look at Rivers State for that. The feud between Governor Fubara and his predecessor, Minister Wyke, is still raging.
It's brutal. You have renewed impeachment threats, and most of the state lawmakers have already defected to the APC. For Wyke, this is existential. There's a quote where he allegedly said he'd be buried politically if Fubara secures a second term.
Wow. And the lesson the sources draw from all this is just incredibly cynical.
It is. It's that power follows future advantage, not past effort. Meaning your past loyalty or who helped you get into power doesn't matter. All that matters is who can guarantee you influence in the future. The people are just watching from the sidelines.
So we've covered a lot of ground. From a foreign policy paralysis that relies on external military might,
to this unbelievable internal crisis over forged national laws.
And finally, to this intense early-stage political maneuvering for 2027, the thread that seems to run through all of it is this deep, deep disconnect, a crisis of trust and accountability.
Absolutely. The sources describe the national mood as a mix of anxiety, frustration, and resilience. But the political class seems to be operating in a completely different universe, focused only on their own survival and advantage.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought. The sources suggest that Nigerian politicians really only fear two things: losing their foreign visas and being held accountable by foreign governments.
Right. We saw how external pressure, whether it's from Trump's rhetoric or Israel's offer, can change the conversation.
So if the political class is more worried about accountability abroad than accountability at home, maybe the focus needs to shift. Should Nigerians stop waiting for a foreign power to intervene or for one politician to make a deal with another?
And instead become their own watchdogs.
Exactly. The sources mention this idea of citizens becoming e-reporters in 2027, using their phones to photograph the official results at every single polling unit, with the election official in the shot before that result sheet goes anywhere.
Using technology to enforce transparency from the ground up.
So here's the thought for you to chew on. Is that the answer?
Yeah.
To ensure the political class finally understands that accountability starts at home and that the mandate truly belongs to the people, regardless of who might be watching from Washington or Tel Aviv.
You've been listening to Weekly Political Pulse, your weekly breakdown of Nigeria's political developments in a nutshell. If this episode helped you understand what's happening beyond the headlines, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps this conversation reach more Nigerians who want clarity, context, and accountability in our politics. Hitting the like button helps YouTube recommend this to others who care about informed discussions like this. You can also share this episode with anyone you think would find it useful. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you are the first to know when a new episode drops. Join us again next week for another calm, honest review of Nigeria's political space.